Hey, my name is Katie Young. Welcome to my video series about how to transform your litigation practice using artificial intelligence. I'm here today with Arthur Rothrock, the creator of my favorite product, Legion. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself if you hadn't seen me in video one. I'm a litigator out of San Francisco. I've been practicing for about 16 years, and I work in the areas of business, employment, real estate, and trademark litigation. And most of my clients are small and medium-sized businesses, and they're all very cost conscious. There's almost never an insurance company paying my bill. So it's been really important for me to always keep costs down. And that's been one of our primary focal points for the firm is in making sure that we can offer cost-effective legal solutions so we can handle smaller clients, smaller cases. As you know, unless there's about $1 million at stake, it doesn't justify litigation. So I'm happy to show you today all the tools that I use for generative AI or used for generative AI and how I ended up using Legion, and we'll live demonstrate the product. And Arthur's going to talk to you about some of the features that it has. And hopefully you will learn in this video how to use these tools and maybe adopt them for your own practice. Arthur, would you like to talk a little bit about your credentials here?
Sure. I'm a litigator. I've been practicing for a little over 8 years. I was at Hopkins and Carley, a large regional firm in San Jose, California. I'm now a CEO and co-founder of Legion. We're at legion.law, where we use AI to draft fully formatted pleadings, discovery, and motions in minutes. I started doing this about a little over a year ago. We founded in March, but before that, I was a very early adopter of AI. And I became known around the firm of being able to do a motion that would take a week or two in a few hours. But I knew if I had the right tooling, I could probably do it in a few minutes. But we waited for a while, looked around, and no one was building these sort of common sense tools to really make use of AI. And so eventually we said the hell with it, and we started building them ourselves. And we've been doing that ever since. We've got a lot of great traction, a lot of progress. We've rolled out doing complaints, contention interrogatories, your full set of written discovery, and then recently objections to discovery when Katie's going to show you a sneak preview of all of those things. So I'm really grateful to be here and add a little bit more color. I'm not just here to try to sell things. I want to sort of share some tips and tricks that I've learned through my own practice and use of using AI because my platform can't do everything. So I use a variety of other AI tools as well to assist me in practice. I am still practicing. I got one case. And we're set for trial in November. Hopefully, knock on wood, if that settles or is gone, then I can completely focus on Legion full time. But for now, I get to say that I'm still a practicing litigator.
That's what I love about working with you on this is that you understand you are a practicing litigator, you've worked at a good firm, and you have kind of like I've done, started playing with these things over time and become more and more masterful of them. I should mention that so my law firm was founded 12 years ago. We're called Ad Astra Law Group, and I've had several associates over time, juniors. It's hard to work with juniors. Recently, my most junior associate was an eighth year, and I used him for first drafts and basic research and things. And in May, he was poached from the firm. And I had met Arthur right around the same time and got introduced to this tool. We had started with Westlaw Co-Counsel. That was my first dip in. And we'll talk about co-counsels today and I'll show it. Uh, my office manager had been pushing me to try these products. And then, especially when our most junior associate left, it became almost necessary for me to turn to Arthur because I was facing this blank page problem. And I'm one of the highest billers in the firm, and that's not going to work for our clients to have me being the one doing the first draft. So I have been working with Arthur quite a bit. We're not here, like you said, we're not here to sell you anything. I'm just here to tell you I've cut through all the other pieces for you to show you what I think is the very best, so you can get to the place that I've reached where I didn't replace my youngest associate. I now have lawyers that range from 12 to 35 years of experience, and all of us need that first draft issue. We're past the point of being the drafters at the beginning. So I've prepared a PowerPoint presentation that we'll go through, and we'll kind of toggle back and forth between the PowerPoint and the internet and these programs that are there so we can show you how they work in real time. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. So here we are. This is video number 2, transforming your practice with AI. You might have seen this in video number 1, but we wanted to explain a little bit about this 2017 paper that came out that really revolutionized how machines understand and generate language. Um, Arthur, did you start with AI before 2017?
I started with ChatGPT probably in December, November of 2022, I think, when that first came out. So
When
I
that
was
first
not really plugged into AI before then.
Okay. And that would make sense because AI wasn't really capable of doing what we needed to do today before this transformer model came out. It used to be that before the transformer model, it would a generative AI would try and understand and generate language based on what it heard, what it listened to before, what it read before, and what it thinks is going to come next. But the transformer changed everything. Instead of looking at it word by word and trying to pick what the next words are going to be, the transformer model looks at everything all at once and decides what's relevant. So imagine you're preparing for trial and you have tons of documents, depots, emails, motions. In this instance, let's say you're a personal injury lawyer and there's medical records. You're not going to read those, you know, all in one row while you're preparing for trial. You're skimming some and you're jumping around and you're paying attention to what really matters to pull that out and put in your trial brief and your witness outlines and winnow down your exhibits. You're looking for dates here and some contradictions and key admissions. Just like the transformer model does, it attends to what is relevant um, with words in a sentence. It's pretty powerful. Move this over. Using Oops, let's go back. Sorry. All right. So let's talk about a legal analogy explaining how uh, generative AI can work in your practice so you can understand what it is so that you can use it competently. So let's say we have a sample sentence. The plaintiff claimed that the defendant intentionally misrepresented the facts. Pre the transformer model, a traditional model would read one word at a time, like I said, and try and remember what came before. But we know as lawyers that the key meaning depends on how all of the words relate. Intentionally modifies misrepresented, which is crucial for you to be able to prove fraud. So the transformer model does the same thing. It assigns weights to how important each word is to understanding the others, just like you deciding what's material, and that is attention. That's all you need. So think of it as how much attention should I pay to each word when trying to understand the meaning of another word. That's what uh, products like Arthur's Legion do. Do you have anything to add here, Arthur?
Yeah, I tend to use a very simplistic way of thinking about these models, and your way is the correct way. The way that I often explain it is it's basically an advanced token predictor. It's predicting the next word. It has the understanding of context, and transformers help with that. But at the most simplistic level, it's really just predicting what the next word is. And one of the things that I tell people is this is why you should not use things like ChatGPT or generative AI for legal research because even though something is the most probabilistically correct, does not mean it's actually correct. So an easy way to think about that is, if you ask a question about a Supreme Court case that's been published all over the place, everyone's talked about it, it's probably in its data set a lot. And that means if you ask a question about that case, you'll probably get a pretty correct answer. But if you have a question about maybe an obscure municipal code that only appears in one book or one time in the data set, no one's really talking about it, it is much higher likelihood, there's a much higher likelihood that it will give you something made up because of that. So if you think about it in terms of, you know, uh, how general of information am I seeking from the model? If it's very general, models do a pretty good job of giving you accurate information. If it's very specific and granular, it won't do as good of a job despite that. So that's an easy way to think about one of the bigger limitations of using generative AI.
Let's talk about ethics. This comes up all the time. And, as lawyers, we have these ethical duties and should really be at the forefront of our thoughts when kind of dipping your toe into the AI world. So let's cover these. Rule 1.1, competence. That's why you're here. What does it mean to be competent in AI tools limitations? So you learn the AI, learn the tool, understand what it can and can't do, and work around that, and uh, make sure that everyone in your office that's going to be using these knows what the limitations of the tool are and learn it. If you can, get a live demo from the company itself. For instance, Arthur and Legion gave us this white glove introduction to how to use it, and every time they roll out a new feature, they show us, and that's because we're early adopters, and I'm just a huge fan of the software, and it's just become such a huge part of my practice. So competence, that's why you're watching this video series, is the beginning of it. What's really important is rule 1.3, which is diligence. Verifying that AI output is a core diligence requirement. And I think you touched on that before, Arthur, that sometimes the AI can make something up. Do you want to talk more about that in terms of verifying AI output as a function of your ethical duty of diligence?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're putting your signature on it, that you're telling the court you have a duty of candor, that you have read it and everything in there is correct. And so in order to comply with that, you need to really read and verify the output of these models because, like I said, sometimes it gets it incorrect, it makes things up. That's what we refer to as hallucinations. And it won't just be cites. Citations are what everyone is getting nailed for right now. We have over 200 attorneys who've gotten sanctioned for that. But it can also hallucinate facts too. I tell my colleagues all the time that I also hallucinate good facts for my client. So we're also fallible people. But these models, because they're trained on all of our data, are also kind of fallible in the same way. So it's important to make sure that when you're using AI, you already have a very good idea of what the output should look like. If not, then you really need to spend some time pulling the cases, checking the source documents, making sure that everything in there is actually true and correct. Otherwise, we've been seeing what's been happening. I think we just had an appellate opinion that just came out a couple days ago, where a lawyer got sanctioned, is going to be referred to the bar for providing a lot of hallucinated citations in a filing. So don't let that be you. Someone's already been made an example of, and now there's precedent to make an example of more.
Do not be that guy. Well, another thing we need to consider is Rule 1.6, which is about confidentiality. And the main thing you need to be concerned about there is whether you're feeding client secrets into a public AI, like a chat GPT. How does Legion or other more specific legal AI softwares address the idea of keeping your clients' confidential data away from a public AI database?
So you always want to remember that old phrase where, if you're not paying for it, then you are the product. And so if you're using a public facing AI and you're not paying for it, then they are looking at that information, they're using it to train their models, they're learning from it, and you don't want that. That's a violation of your duty of confidentiality. You can't do it that way. So when you are using other purpose-built tools, Legion, for example, we use a variety of third-party models. We go to the top shelf. We try to use the most advanced stuff. But before we use them, we make sure that we get zero data retention agreements with them so that nobody is looking at any of the interactions that we are using them for. Also, anyone that's using Amazon's AWS, they provide a lot of these models that have that zero data retention as a feature by default. And they also, have their encryption both for data in transit and at rest. So you want to sort of just look at the privacy policy, talk with attorneys, or not the attorneys, but these vendors to make sure that they are complying. They're doing all the things that you'd want to see so that you can feel confident that your duty of confidentiality is not being breached. And these are not things that are entirely new. I mean, we've had everyone uses Outlook. Those are all on Microsoft servers. We use e-discovery vendors all the time. If you use OneDrive or Box.com or Dropbox, that's all cloud stuff that's hosted by other people. It's sort of the same sort of questions that you want to be asking and evaluating for AI tools as you are for these other cloud-based sort of offerings.
Thanks. That's really interesting and really important to keep in mind. Uh, Rule 3.3 about candor, as you mentioned before, you sign that document, it's your document. You are certifying to the court that you looked into this and everything in here has factual support or will have factual support through discovery, and that the legal arguments are tenable or at least a reasonable extension of existing law. And that comes into play when you're concerned about in state court in California, Rule 128.7, which is a sanctions statute that allows for sanctions against both the litigant and the attorney for signing and filing a pleading that contains factual falsehoods or legal arguments that are completely without merit. Um, so you have a duty to present any of those false facts from reaching the court. As Arthur had mentioned, there can be hallucinations, and we're going to talk about the hallucinations throughout this presentation because it is so important to drill into your head for you to not become one of those guys who failed their duty of candor and their duty of diligence and went ahead and signed and filed a pleading that contained either a fact that came from what's called factual drift, which we'll go over in a little bit, or a hallucitation, which is a word I like to use. I learned that from someone else, but I'll own it. So watch out for that. And then the last rule that we wanted to point out is Rule 5.1, 5.3, which is about supervision. You have a duty to supervise your AI just like you would your human assistant. Same way that if your first, second, third, fourth, fifth year associate gives you a memo or a draft of a pleading, you're going to spend the time to go through it with a fine tooth comb, especially if you're needing to train that associate. And so, sort of one of the benefits of this that you'll see is that the writing and the application of the facts to the law and finding the law is not only fast, but also pretty close to what one of those associates would have done at just a fraction of the price. But you really have to supervise what's going on because of the concern over the hallucinated citations and the factual drifts. Um,
I
so
would
there's still a lot of human involved.
I would also add to that. I'll do a quick shout out. I just recorded a an educational webinar with CEB called the Lawyer Survival Guide to the AI Revolution. It sort of
Mhm.
relates to Rule 1.1. For competence, you need to sort of learn these things, understand AI, how it works, and even if you yourself are not the one who's using these tools, I can almost guarantee you that your associates, your paralegals, your case assistants, the staff that are working with you are going to be looking at these tools and maybe using them. And if you say you're not allowed to use them, they're probably going to be using them anyway. So it's something that, you can't feel completely safe and assured that, oh, I just told everyone not to use AI and now I can, file these documents and not have to worry about hallucinated cases. You might be in for a bad time. It could be that an associate, maybe he was working too much, he was stretched thin, they went to ChatGPT and tried to get a quick draft out the door just to get it done, and then you'll end up with hallucinated cases. So you have a duty to supervise not only the AI, but also the people that are working for you that might be using these tools. And I will tell you that personally, when I have the AI provider goes down and I can't use these tools, I just don't work now because why would I go back to doing something that would take me 8 hours that I could do in 10 minutes? I'm just going to go take a walk and take a break for 30 minutes until it comes back. So it'll be very hard for people that get used to using these tools to stop using them just because someone says so. It's sort of like when your parents say, don't do that thing, you're just like, cool, I'm just not going to tell you that I'm doing that thing. So, what applies to parenting also tends to apply in a professional environment as well, because we're all human. So that's what I would add to your rule 5.1 and 5.3 duties.
Yes, and I'll say as the managing partner of my practice, as I mentioned, I just don't have the time to work with juniors in addition to doing all the marketing and the admin and dealing with people issues and all the things. This is much more easier to manage than a human person who is a junior. That being said, Arthur and I were part of a presentation just a few nights ago, or earlier this week, for the Inn of Court that I'm a part of. Arthur's a part of a different Inn of Court, but I did a similar presentation like this and live demonstrated his software. and frankly, through the live demonstration part, which you will see today, scared the pants off the audience, scared the crap out of the audience. And they were sort of looking nervous. But the next speaker after me was a professor from the University of San Francisco School of Law talking about how over the last couple of years, their legal research and writing program has incorporated the use of generative AI into uh, into their uh, outputs so that these new incoming classes of lawyers know how to work with the AI to produce really high quality first drafts to give to you. So that, when you're going to go supervise what was there, you know that your associate has the competence to use the tool, have them do the initial set of site checking so they're, exercising their diligence. And then when you come in to do the supervision, it's just the same as it's always been. There's still always going to be humans in the loop. So, I wouldn't be concerned about what's going to happen to young lawyers. We're still going to need young lawyers to, at a lower billing rate, manipulate the AI and produce that first draft. I'm not so worried about them. It's just changing how to train the new ones, right?
Very good. We also scared that the federal court judge as well.
Yes, the third person to speak on the panel was a judge from the San Francisco Superior Court who spoke directly to Arthur and said, "Can you make this other kind of software? I really like that." And so he was talking about the judiciary's use of AI. California just promulgated some new rules for judicial use of AI, and that judge had sat on the task force that was working on those. So it was a really interesting presentation, showing practical use, academic use, and then judicial use. That was really fun. So thanks for participating there, Arthur.
No, no problem. You guys did great. I just sat there and looked pretty.
Yeah. The only malfunction was my computer. That was fun. All
That's
right,
true.
let's move.
Murphy had to pick one person.
Yeah, most definitely. All right. We're gonna this video is focused on generative AI, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about predictive AI because this is the AI you use already. Arthur, do you want to talk about how folks have already been in this world?
Yeah, so this sort of stuff is all around you. When you're sitting at a stoplight, there's usually some AI algorithm that's doing predictions on traffic patterns to, know exactly when to change the lights for you. Whenever you're typing in something into your phone, it's seeing what you're typing and using AI to predict what word you're probably trying to go for to suggest, how to do that. If you have autocorrect, that's usually AI. It's pretty much everywhere. It's not been labeled as AI, even though technically it is, because AI is just a very, very broad term that applies to machines sort of mimicking human intelligence in some way, shape, or form, either through machine learning or neural networks or all the other different sort of terminologies for the different ways in which we get the same result. So this is not something that is brand new, but it is new and sort of in the public eye thanks to ChatGPT and generative AI specifically becoming a household name.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I've seen it, and you've seen it in your Outlook email, right? It predicts the next words. I'm also using an AI assisted marketing program. That's pretty cool. That scrapes the internet for information about you, and then asks you a series of questions to get to know you better, and then produces every month a series of about 15 questions that it thinks that you should be answering for an audience of folks that might want to hire you. And you record a couple of like 1 to 2 minute videos, and then there's post production and everything. It's really nice. And then it's an agentic AI, and then it then goes ahead and posts on a schedule that the marketing folks that run it have predetermined. Pretty neat. So
Yeah,
I'm using it everywhere. Once I realized that I'm already on this train, I figured I might as well get a good seat.
you see what else you can use it for. I mean, it is great. It's everywhere. I mean, even Grammarly, the way that that sort of helps you is also through the use of AI. It's one of the reasons why I have some concerns about a lot of the federal court judges imposing standing orders where they want you to disclose if you've used AI, to draft your brief in any way. I'm like, okay, well, That's pretty broad. I mean, if someone used autocorrect, if someone used Grammarly, I mean, if I had to reword a sentence and I use ChatGPT, does that mean now I have to disclose? There's a lot of issues with that in terms of being overly broad in these some of these standing orders because AI is everywhere and people don't really have a good understanding of that yet. So, if you want to follow the letter of the law, yeah, every single filing is AI generated because, I couldn't remember how to spell a word and I right clicked and I chose what it suggested for me. So that means that I used AI in order to draft this pleading. So it's just something to sort of think about and be aware of that it's already everywhere. It's just now a little bit more apparent.
Okay. That seems to be true. So let's move on to what's happening now with this generative AI. Is predictive AI was, as we said, sort of the dipping your toe in. Where is my arrow? I've lost my arrow. So we can move on to the next one. Um, there we are. Sorry about that. There we go. Let me move this out of the way. All right. So while we warm you up to showing you generative AI, let's talk about what the difference is between this predictive AI that you're sort of used to already, and then the generative AI that we're all starting to adopt. I mean, this really came on for me in May 2025. That's how quickly I've learned these tools and been moving forward. So predictive and generative AI are kind of two branches of the same tree, both powered by these what you mentioned neural networks. Do you want to talk more about what a neural network is?
I do not think I am qualified to talk about a neural network.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you're the lawyer, right?
Yeah.
Uh, got it. So, as we were saying in predictive AI, right, the core question is what's likely to happen? How is generative AI different?
I mean, generative AI is more so, a creative venture. It's the creation of either text or audio or video now, and it's a little bit different from your predictive AI, which is just sort of figuring out an outcome rather than creating something new or novel.
Gotcha. All right. For typical output, I did this the other day. Some good things that come out of predictive AI are traditionally like classifications, probabilities, and numerical forecasts. I was telling Arthur, I have a business coach that asked me, as the managing partner, whether I track how much time I spend on admin tasks. And it turns out I do meticulously. And she said, take a PDF printout of your admin time and descriptions and run that through ChatGPT and have it give you classifications of how much time you spend on each kind of task. And then we can figure out from there, what you can cut from. And it gave me these really cool bar charts that I asked for. And then I said, make it into a pie chart. That was really fun. And so I was able to use a predictive AI and a generative with and a generative AI to come together with a real analysis for my business that was fun and easy to make. But generative AI is different, right? It created it's creating novel text, images, code, and audio, as you said. And that's what we're going to show you in the next couple of slides when we get to the live demo. There's a huge range of quality when we get to the creation of novel text. I'm sure you've seen that over your course, progressively getting more and more involved in AI. How has that changed for you?
It has been insane how quickly we have moved. I mean, just from using ChatGPT when that first came out to where we are today, the quality of output has been improved a lot. And, it's not just the sort of the quality of output, it's also how much you can do with these things. The general ability of these models has increased quite a bit. They've started to figure out like, before it could only really do the facsimile of math because it was trained on a large data set. So it saw in its data set that 2 + 2 = 4. So it could do that. But when you got more complex things, it couldn't do that. And so they figured out some cool workarounds for, okay, so if we see the user ask for something, it'll call a tool and it'll do a Python script to like figure out how to do that. And then we'll give you the answer. They've also increased the context windows. If you use like an open source model, the context is maybe like 4,000 tokens to 1,000 tokens. And just to sort of give you an idea, like Claude or ChatGPT has a 200,000 token context window, and that equates to about 300 pages of single space text. So now we have Gemini that's gone up to 1 million tokens, and
Oh, wow.
it, Claude Sonnet can now do 1 million tokens as well. So the amount of information that you could feed these things and still get generally reliable output has increased. The abilities of these models have increased. The quality of the writing has increased as well. I mean, it pretty much in every metric these things have grown, and it's not just in terms of text output as well. I mean, if you look at some of the old AI generated videos, the famous one is Will Smith eating spaghetti. That's nightmare inducing. It does not do a very good job. But now, if you do it now with like Gemini's VO3 is their video generator, it'll do a really good job. It's now, I gave it an image of me, just a headshot of me sitting there, and I said, make me stand up and point at a slide deck and say, now we're going to talk about deepfakes. And it created an entire video that looked exactly like me getting up and pointing at a slide and speaking. It didn't sound like me, but I used 11 Labs and I gave it some of the Litigators Path podcast that I host, some of my audio, and I had it train my voice on that. And it did a really good job of recreating my voice. So all I could do, I could just take some audio or go to 11 Labs, type in a couple sentences, and then overlay that over top of the video I generated. And now I have a completely fake video. And it works really well versus I did a demo of this back in March where I was sort of talking about deepfakes and how hard it was to create videos. We don't have to worry about grandma sitting there and giving you like a recorded living will so much because there's all these issues and hallucinations and extra limbs and sort of weird physics that are involved with video. But now it's those are getting better and better and better. I thought we were years away from that, but from March to September of this year, we're already at very high fidelity, pretty good image generation and text or and video generation that pretty much everyone can do, which is crazy. So when you ask me about where we are, a couple of years ago, in the past, 6 months, it's already been a crazy leap. So I'm pretty excited for what we're going to see in the next year or two.
Wild. And that was something that the San Francisco Superior Court judge touched on at that court presentation that we were at is what the judiciary is doing to deal with evidentiary issues created by AI and deep fakes. And he was saying in his courtroom, he's on a criminal assignment right now. He was saying in his courtroom, he requires that the parties bring up right away whether they intend to make any objection or file any motion in limine regarding use of generative AI to produce a deep fake or some like I guess they're all called deep fakes, but yeah, that's the concern is that it was made by AI and it's going to be used in a criminal court against a litigant. And he said, I just want to make sure that nobody's bringing up whether this could be an AI deep fake in the closing arguments. We're going to have dealt with it before, and that's not going to come up if I decided that this evidence is entitled to be admitted and indeed authentic. I thought that was interesting from his point of view.
It's a huge issue. So at the Ingram of Court that I'm a part of, we had a great presentation about this from Judge Pennypacker and Emer Carlson. And one of the issues that they sort of brought up was because these tools are so easily accessible now, you can just Google them. You can hop on Snapchat, you can get a filter right away that'll give you a black eye. And that's like a problem when you're in like a very high volume. You got DV cases, you got TROs, and the rules of evidence are a little bit more loose. Someone's just going to come up to the judge or show them their phone or have a printout, of them with a black eye or something. And, how are you going to have the tools to figure out whether or not that's real or fake? And that's a huge issue because, especially as these tools get more sophisticated and more easy for a layperson to use, that really sort of calls into question whether or not our evidentiary code is actually set up to handle that. And one of the ways, or at least the only tried and true way to figure that out, since as they get better, it's hard to use your eyes to see this. If you had an AI generated image, you can always just say, oh, okay, they have 7 fingers. That's not correct. But they're refining that. That's less and less of an issue. And that means that you have to rely on chain of custody and you have to look at the metadata and figure out where did this image come from? And that usually involves hiring an expert of some sort to, some sort of forensic analyst to go in there and give you that information or not. And that's expensive. So that's going to be out of reach for a lot of people. So I don't have any answers, unfortunately, and neither so far has the judiciary. But I think we're all very concerned about what AI is going to mean in terms of proffering of evidence, because I think the judge at your presentation earlier this week, Katie, was talking about, I think, a Florida statute where an attorney has to affirm that they were reasonably diligent, or whatever that means, or whatever standard they use, in terms of figuring out whether this was a true or legitimate image or not. And how are you supposed to comply with that? I mean, are you going to have to just have an expert on standby where anytime a client gives you something, you got to send it to them and say, hey, check the metadata on this. Let me know whether or not it's AI generated or not. Otherwise that's a big issue. If the other side goes and they have more money and they can hire an expert to do that, they're going to nail you and say you didn't comply with your ethical duties. Your client gave you all this AI generated stuff and you proffered it up as evidence. It's a thorny issue, and it's only going to be more at the forefront, I think, as the years sort of go by, or at least in the next few years, we're going to see a lot more of it. Right now, the hot thing is lawyers and getting sanctioned for hallucinated cases. I think the next hot button issue is going to be, people getting sanctioned and seeing court cases come down. I think there was just one recently about someone got caught for submitting AI generated images and video. And luckily it was because, it wasn't very good. There was some weird lighting, whenever they spoke, it didn't really match their mouth. So like there was some tells that the judge and the attorneys could pick up on to sort of spot it. But it's the ones where that, as we get more sophisticated, that's going to be harder and harder to do. So it is a big concern, I think.
Definitely some thorny evidentiary issues. Um, all right, let's move on. I wanted to give you some examples of how you might already be using predictive AI. Those are any like case outcome prediction tools that you might have used. One thing we might have all used is technology assisted review, TAR, TAR, which goes through and scores documents by relevancy. And then some of the criminal courts have been and criminal attorneys have been using sentencing risk models. What is looks like what generative AI does is what drafting complaints and deposition summaries is what I'm going to talk about in these videos. But have you also seen like chatbots for intake forms?
Yeah, there's a few startups that I've seen doing it. I mean, we've had chatbots for a long time. They haven't been particularly good. No one likes dealing with them on the phone or on a website, but I think a lot of mills or high volume PI firms are exploring these tools because it gives them a little bit more of an empathetic. They have a little bit more influence in terms of how the chatbots sort of handle that intake. They can be a little bit more empathetic. They're more intelligent. They can figure out what questions to ask and sort of dive in and get a little bit more. So I think we'll start seeing a little bit more chatbot intake, at least for those sort of practice areas. I think for your other general billable hour firms, I think they'll probably stay away from it because they'll want more a higher touch on their clients, more of a red carpet sort of service. But they're definitely out there and people are exploring. I've seen a few of those.
Yeah. Courts have been including chatbots more and more on their websites as sort of an access to justice issue where you can ask the chatbot a question about, how do I file for divorce? And it'll give you an answer that an AI engine that they've worked with has been generating, and it's really powerful for self-represented litigants. Definitely an access to justice issue. I think we touch on that in one of these videos. Um, Anyways, the key methods. Do you want to go over that? That's some
Yeah, so I can talk about some of the key methods for generative AI. So we already sort of touched on hallucinations being one of the big issues, or probably the biggest limitation of these things. Folks are used to a calculator where you punch in some numbers and you get the answer and that's the right answer, but you don't really get that sort of that certainty with AI. And so one of the solutions for that is what's called RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. And that's in the most simplistic terms possible. You have some sort of knowledge database and you condense that into a bunch of math or numbers. And then whenever someone has a query, that query gets turned into some other numbers, and then they compare that with that knowledge database and then figure out what content is probably most likely to relate to that query. And then before the model answers you, it'll say, it'll instruct the model, hey, LLM, or large language model AI, here's some output, here's some context. I want you to read this context, and then you can respond to the user. And so that helps a little bit in terms of figuring out a way to address hallucination where it's not just, relying on its big brain to just sort of predict what the correct answer is. We're trying to add a little bit more intention behind pulling actual relevant information before we provide it to the user. But there's still limitations with that too, because there's the issue with, is your query going to actually find the relevant data in there? Is that data even in there in the first place? Because if it's not, it'll either return nothing or the model will still just make stuff up. And there's also what's called chunking, which is how much information do you give to the model in order to respond. If you only give it a piece of a case, it's really hard to assess if the actual case itself is relevant if you don't have the whole case. And if you give it the whole case, then now you might overwhelm the context window, or you've given it too much context. And often, maybe you want a few cases. So if you give it too many, then that also hurts the certainty there. So there's still some issues with RAG. So, for folks that are being marketed at from vendors that are saying, oh, we use RAG and we use all this cool tech, be aware that there is still a lot of limitations there. And just because there is RAG does not mean that it will not hallucinate. It is an imperfect solution to that problem. They're getting better, but it's still imperfect. And then the other example that we have on here is reinforcement learning from human feedback. And that's in general how a lot of these uh, uh, models are created in the first place. Is, you have, here's a query, and then here's an answer, and then a human says, yes, that's a good answer. No, it's not a good answer. And if you do that enough, now you have some sort of training data or training for the model, so it understands what a good response or good output looks like or not. And some folks will take this and do what's called fine tuning. Fine tuning is another thing that a lot of legal vendors, legal tech vendors will say that they're doing. Oh, we have our own proprietary fine tune model, which means that they sort of did their own version of reinforcement learning from human feedback. They maybe have their own data set that they use to train it on, and that also still suffers from the same problems. And sometimes it actually messes with these large, really powerful general models because you're messing with the weights and the transformers. So it will still give you hallucinated output and may not be as powerful as your general purpose tools because they've sort of been pigeonholed into this very narrow area of specialization. So that can also sort of hurt feedback as well. So even though if someone is saying, oh, we have a proprietary fine-tuned model, still be aware that oftentimes that may be open source. It may be trained on a very narrow data set. If you don't know what's in that data set, it's really hard to assess whether or not it was actually trained on good content. One easy example of that is, say I train a model on 10,000 motions. Now it's like, okay, now it only really is trained on those 10,000 motions, but did I actually spend the time to figure out if those were winning motions or not? Was the content that went into this model good or not? Was the outcome of those motions good? And then the other issue with it is, if the case law changes and those 10,000 motions relied on that one key case, you have to retrain the entire model again. You have to fine tune a completely new one, but there's no motions that have that brand new case out there yet. So now what? So that's another big limitation and something to be aware of when legal tech companies are sort of marketing at you and saying, oh, we have RAG, we have fine-tuned models, that sort of thing. There are still issues with it. It's not a perfect solution.
Well, look at us exercising our duty of competence and understanding the tool's limitations. It's great. Um, you know, Speaking of ethics, we'll finish up this slide by talking about what the ethical focus is for predictive AI. What you're concerned about is the model having any bias, which leads to disparate impact on various parts of your output there. And then, as we said in generative AI, right, we're concerned about the hallucinations, we're concerned about confidentiality, and then for authorship, right, that's your duty of candor, duty of diligence, saying you looked into it and you're being honest with the court about what's there. All right, let's move on. All right, let's talk about those risks of AI use in a little bit more context. We've mentioned it over and over, and I said we'll mention it over and for because we want to make sure you're not that guy that ends up getting the $10,000 sanction against them. Last year, I saw in a court presentation that they said the term hallucitation. A hallucination is where the AI output contains false, misleading, or non-existent information and confidently presents it as a fact to you. It can be invented facts, it can be nonsensical narratives, but the important thing to know is that it's not a bug in the software. The AI will never tell you, I don't know the answer. It will confidently make something up and hand it to you, which is why you need to exercise your duty of diligence and candor and go through and make sure that those things are real. And so this is just sort of an inherent risk of use of these models. And if you can accept that risk and exercise your duty of supervision and diligence, you can get past the issues with the hallucitations. There's also the concept of factual drift, sort of a gradual decline in the accuracy or reliability of the AI model's factual outputs over time, and certainly based on how much input you put in, right? The more you put into the model to read, the kind of degrades the facts that come out. And if it comes out with one fact that is hallucinated, it can then run with that all the way through whatever output it is. And if you don't know the facts of your case, you've really got to watch out for that. Like for instance, I did a solid for my co-founder, who's known as Aloha Dave. He's from Hawaii and he's been practicing about 35 years, and he has just a very relaxed aloha sense of how to practice law. He's very good at it, but I tend to be a little more anxious. And recently we had a counterclaim and arbitration due on a Friday morning, and in true Aloha Dave style, he scheduled the call with the client to go over what needs to be in the counterclaim and all the facts at 4 o'clock on Thursday, the day before. Unbelievable. So I said to him, as sort of the this co-equal second on this case, I said, all right, well, take copious notes, and I will on Thursday night run this through Legion and see if we can come up with a counterclaim, and I'll hand it to you and our most junior associate on the case is a 12th year. She and he were on the call with the client together. I wasn't there. So I didn't know all the facts of the case. I was there at the intake and I read the complaint, and now I'm kind of familiar, but I'm the one that knows how to run the AI. So I said, okay, give me, all the things you want me to consider and I'll do this first draft for you. So I was able to use Legion and get a complaint, which I turned into counterclaims. It's just, changing the language there. And it did have some factual drift in it, just a teeny tiny bit, but I wasn't able to catch it because I didn't know the facts of the case. But I turned it over to my cohorts the next morning who were on the call with the client, and they were able to catch that and move forward. So that's an example of how to exercise your ethical duty to check what's there. It's not just the citations, it can also be the facts. And so you have to know what you are doing. We were talking about law students using these programs, right? They don't yet, as law students, totally know what they're doing. And so we train them as lawyers throughout the course of the years that they are in law school. And if we're training them also how to use these tools, then they should be way more useful for folks like me, or managing partner of a busy practice going forward.
Great. I love that story. And it's honestly something that I would do in practice anyway, in a way. It'll be, maybe I'll put something in a complaint that I'm going to send to the client that I know is incorrect, just to make sure that the client actually did a good job of reading it. And if they don't catch it, then I know, like, we need to sit down and maybe just run through this ourselves.
Right.
So it's good. And also sometimes I'll be like, well, I don't have all the facts, but it would be great if this happened. So I'll put it in here and we'll talk with the client to see if that actually did happen. So, but to your point, it's good. You should really have a good idea of what the output should look like when using these tools. And if you don't, then just make sure you have some checks and balances and a process for making sure that that's addressed, either through having someone else who is more familiar with reviewing it, or sitting down with the client, reviewing it closely, and then that all sort of makes sure that you don't run afoul of any sort of issues.
Right. Well, let's switch to the point of the presentation where we actually show you how to use this stuff. I feel like we've educated you on your ethics and all the things to look out for. So let's actually look at what we're going to do. So Arthur and I have been working on this, and he came up with a fake demand letter. So we're not going to use any of my clients or his clients' information for the purpose of this demonstration. So Arthur, do you want to give us a little overview of what the hypothetical is?
Yeah, I mean it's a simple breach of contract case between I think a medical provider and a software company. Some promises were made, and they did not deliver on them, and that's your quick hitter of it. I
I've had that case before. You're supposed to meet various milestones in the software development. I think I've had three or four of these, right? It's so common. And then, in this case, I think there was uh, some facts that would support maybe a fraud cause of action on the basis that the software company was promising, oh, we're going to deliver, knowing that it couldn't deliver. And I tell you those facts, so keep those in mind. And so we'll be able to show how those facts get interpreted in the various ways to draft. So what we're going to do first is draft a complaint. And then we'll get on to drafting some discovery. And what I want to do is first explain to you kind of generally how to use it. And then we're going to click to into some examples and actually work with it. So the first thing you're going to do is when you get into the program, you want to upload documents for the model to review, usually your pleadings, your exhibits, and then there's the prompt. You have to tell it what you want it to do. And that can be quite simple. So let me show, we'll get out of here. And Arthur and I were playing around with some products that you might be used to already. For instance, Westlaw Co-Counsel. I'm a Westlaw girl. I've always been a Westlaw girl. Lexis has Prodigy, I think it's called. Protege.
protege.
Protege. All right. So I imagine it kind of works the same way. And, of all my lawyer friends that I've talked to about my use of AI, and a lot of them, especially the big firm ones, have said, oh, yeah, we're involved in AI. We bought Westlaw Co-Counsel. And I started with Westlaw Co-Counsel. It is a baby compared to the sort of model that Arthur's working with and the output there. But we figured we would show you kind of where everyone's been starting with co-counsel so you can see what the interface looks like and what the work product looks like. And then we'll work up to showing you a more specialized product like Legion that I've been using to transform my practice. So here's where we started. We're in Westlaw, and you can see there's this little menu, little drop down here, and you make that bigger, and it explains to you what it can do. You're going to hit this button for co-counsel skills, and it'll show you what co-counsel is able to do. It'll research, it can review documents, it can summarize documents, and it can draft. So it does more than, like, for instance, Legion, Arthur's product, only drafts. Um, uh, there's other products that do more than this, but I've found that they're not as precise. So for the purpose of this effort, let's try drafting within co-counsel. You can draft, or you can have it prepared for a deposition. I tried that, pretty weak. So if you hit draft, I'm gonna actually click out of this because we already did it. So it tells you what to do, identify the document, provide the context, such. So what I did was I took the sample demand letter that you prepared for Meridian versus Quantum Healthcare saying, or Quantum Dynamics saying, hey, you breached the contract. And then I've uploaded the actual agreement for breach of contract that you prepared. And what we did was told it simply draft a complaint for breach of contract and added those two files. And here's what it gave us. Took about a minute or two. And it spit out plaintiff, defendant, jurisdiction, some facts, nature of the breach, a little bit about damages, and the relief sought and the conclusion. So we downloaded that. Download that, and I'll show you what the output was. This is what the complaint looks like that came out of co-counsel. You can see it is not on pleading paper,
It's
and
pretty good.
it's rather rudimentary, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, the problem with these tools is, they're really large, and so they really try to appeal to the lowest common denominator, and you really just see that in output. They're so general that they become almost useless.
Yeah. Yeah, when I first got this and I gave it a try, I was a little disappointed because I expected more. I didn't know what to expect, but it was more than this. And so I think a lot of people have been kind of turned off going down the legal AI path because they started with co-counsel and it's only moderately useful. And maybe they're not so excited about moving down the path in AI with legal AI. Is that an objection you get commonly, Arthur?
Yeah, I mean, we're fighting an uphill battle already to, folks that still use typewriters or WordPerfect, and they tend to be risk adverse. They don't like new things, and how can you blame them when they're confronted like, oh, okay, AI is a thing. I can trust Westlaw or I can trust Lexis, and then they try their software, and this is what the AI output is, and they're like, why? I have to reformat everything. It's missing a lot of details. This is going to require more work than had I just decided to do it myself using my own sort of pleadings and templates that I have already prepared. And that to me is not it's not a great way to run a business. It's not a great first introduction to AI. There are better tools out there.
Absolutely. All right, let's look at one that's a little bit better. This is AI.law. I had a client that had access to this software, and she's allowed us to use it. And I don't like this one as much for a couple of reasons, which will become evident to you. It's a little clunky as compared to your product, Arthur, and it doesn't produce something that I can use, right away. So here you've got to tell it who's the plaintiff, who's the defendant. You can add more if there's multiple plaintiffs, multiple defendants. And then in the allegations, you have to tell it what the facts of the case are. And down here, you can tell it what monetary demand you want it to make. And then if the case is a little bit more complex and some of the cause of action are against some defendants, but not all of them, you can let it know here. So that's a good feature. And then you tell it what causes of action you think you want it to focus on, and then tell it the state and the name of the court, which helps AI law find the right laws and elements. Um, and then you upload supporting documents. And in this case, we uploaded the same thing, the sample demand letter and the agreement. And I will show you what the output was. Here is, so same information. We told it, draft a complaint for breach of contract. That's all. I didn't tell it anything else. And I uploaded the same documents as before. And what I did to fill in the facts, where it has you here filling in what the allegations are, I took our demand letter and copied and pasted the factual section. So got that. And then here's what it gave us. Not on pleading paper, and it has this note up here that the complaint follows the federal court system. When we were doing this run through earlier, Arthur, you looked at this and said, the warning at the top gives me pause. Why was that?
I mean, they say that they follow federal court formatting, but if I were to just delete that paragraph and try to file this, it would definitely be rejected. And it's making you do a lot of work yourself. It's like, oh, you should add numbering so that each paragraph is numbered. Great, thank you so much. Glad that I get to do that. And also federal tends to have a lot of local rules that impact how you file things, what you need to have on your pleadings, and just saying generally, oh, this follows the federal court system that's uniform everywhere is just not true. It doesn't really understand what lawyers need and what we need to look at in order to file this stuff. And it just gets better from here, honestly.
Mhm. Well, that's the human in the loop, right? And an access to justice issue. So, an unrepresented litigant, if they, got themselves an AI.law subscription and they were in federal court and tried to make this happen, they maybe wouldn't know to check the local rules or, what the caption page needs to include. And, while it's helpful that a tool like this can generate information that might be useful as a complaint, it doesn't capture all the formatting, and certainly in federal court isn't going to capture those local rules that are out there. So, this is why lawyers are still going to have jobs, even when generative AI, is more and more popular. Is that you have to know what you're looking for, what the work project is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to include in order to be able to use these tools competently. So you can see here, there's no caption, but it did pick up that the complaint is going to be for three causes of action. Remember, we only told it breach of contract, and it gave us fraud and negligent misrepresentation. And here it gives us a little intro, which is the same thing that the co-counsel did. It gives us,
I don't even think co-counsel did an intro. I think they
did
just,
it? Let's see. It's right
yeah,
here. You're right. It did
oh,
not. It went straight into
parties.
parties, jurisdiction, and venue.
Yep.
Okay, so then we do one better with AI.law, and we've got an introduction, jurisdiction, and then it talks about the parties. So, all right, we got the basics. And then it goes into the allegations, which I'm sure it pulled from what I had cut and pasted into the box about what the allegations are. And of course, you've got to check all of that and make sure there's no factual drift in there. And then it got to the causes of action. And there's the breach of contract.
And that's it.
And that's it.
No fraud, nothing, none of the other ones that I identified, just breach of contract. Okay.
Yeah, that was weird. So I don't know if we need to regenerate this or I'm not sure. But in any event, I just wanted to show you, I tried co-counsel, I tried AI.law, and now I'm going to show you a different program that I think you're really going to like, and that's Arthur's program. So let's flip to Legion. This is what Legion looks like. And we're going to start a new matter. And this is going to be demo. So you can see right off the bat, it's different than AI.law, and this product is way more specialized. Currently, you're only in 3 states, right? Where are you going next?
Right now we're pretty laser focused on California, but we'll be tackling the larger jurisdictions that are pretty litigious. It'll be New York, Texas, Pennsylvania, Florida are probably the more immediate ones that we'll start moving to. But right now we're refining and making sure that we know what we're doing in California first.
Great. All right. Well, your interface is a little different, right? So we gave the matter name, we picked California, and in this one, we know that it's in Santa Clara County based on the venue clause in the complaint. Let's click create matter.
I want people to run their cases in our platform. And so, how do we organize cases? We organize it by client and matter, what jurisdiction is it? So I want to make sure that there's easy buckets. So when you're like, oh, I need to do something, you can just go right back into, your matter that you're familiar with, just like opening, the physical file that you'd have, and then you can start your work there.
Right. All right. What I noticed about your opening screen here is that there's a lot of things that are grayed out. So it looks like you can do currently a complaint, and then you can propound to and respond to discovery and get a counsel declaration and do a notice of motion. But I see you're working on a lot more things. You want to tell me about that?
Sure. So we sort of started at the beginning with complaints, and now we're moving towards we pretty much wrapped up the discovery part of it, and then now we get into the fighting about discovery part. So what's up next on our timeline and our roadmap is going to be handling meet and confer letters, and then eventually your discovery motions to compel further responses, and then we'll sort of reassess and figure out, do we want to make some more general tools? Is there other motions that people would really want? We'll start filling out the rest of our roadmap with, going back and tackling cross complaints, answers, that sort of thing, just to have a sort of full product suite to tackle as much stuff as we can for litigators.
All right. Well, so far, what you have has been extremely useful and has transformed my practice, right? We represent both plaintiffs and defendants. A complaint is something I need to do a lot. I just told you the story about the making a complaint from your model and then turning it into a counterclaim in arbitration. That was no problem. So we're going to show you the complaint and then propounding and responding to discovery along with the counsel declaration. So we'll show you a bunch of different functions of the software today. And it's as easy as clicking, all right, complaint, generate document. All right, so what are we going to do? We're going to upload the documents that we uploaded to the other two pieces of software, the sample agreement and the demand letter that was written. Upload there. And then while that's working, I'm going to give it the same prompt that I gave to co-counsel and the same prompt that I gave to AI.law, which is simply draft a complaint for breach of contract. That's it. And so it'll take a minute for your for the files to upload. But what happens if I put a lot more information in the instructions and additional case details part?
I mean, we give you about 5,000 characters to work with there, so you can put some stuff in there. Usually, I recommend, if you have like a lot of facts, just put it in a Word doc and upload it. But the way that I think about this is, I want to make it very similar to how you would send an email to an associate. You're saying, I need you to draft me a complaint. At a minimum, maybe I want to see these causes of action. Here's all these documents, the demand letter, the contract, that sort of thing that you're going to need to look at to do this. And what you want to do for your associate is just give them any context that isn't obvious in the provided documents. So that's usually what I recommend there. But if you have a demand letter, then you already sort of know who you represent. And if you have an agreement, you already sort of know what probably the specific terms are that you care about in that agreement. So you don't really need to give the associate a whole lot. And Legion's the same way. If they upload documents, give it pretty much everything it would need to know, then you really don't need to give it a whole lot in the instructions in case details section.
Okay, well, let's give it a shot. Analyze case. So this will take a minute, and let's flip back to our PowerPoint. So we had told you you got to feed the beast a prompt and tell it what to do. Arthur just mentioned that if you want to give it more information, you could use a Word document if it's beyond 5,000 characters. You said 5,000 words.
5,000 characters.
Okay. So what I've done before, you saw on Legion screen that there were some things that were grayed out. Because we're super special to Arthur, sometimes I can just email him documents and he will run it through the model and give me something more complicated like a trial brief. I've had it do two trial briefs for me this summer. One where the client is just extremely cost conscious and it's basically a contingency case for me at this point. And two, another one that was a very compressed trial prep period because the judge denied our stipulation to continue the trial with 12 days before the trial, even though we filed it months before. So without Arthur's help, without Legion's help, I would not have been able to prepare for trial in 12 days. Because, of course, I told my associate, go ahead and take your family on a vacation to Panama. The trial's going to get continued. And I said to my ex husband, yeah, go ahead and go visit your sister. I'll keep the kids. The trial's going to get continued. Oh my God, worst mistake. Don't do that. Do not be me. They told me not to do that. And I did it anyways. And I got in trouble. But what I did to create the trial brief is exactly what Arthur just suggested, which is to create a Word document that you can upload into Legion. So what I did to make a trial brief was I collected all of the facts that have been pled in the case across all the motions, across the complaints, and then I took all the legal arguments that we've already made in the various motions, and then gave it some information about any arguments that I want it to make. And then I added in the same Word document, just a total data dump into the same Word document, the jury instructions, any statutes I wanted it to look at, and any of the cases that I was concerned about with the citation there. And I was able to feed that all into the model and get a really useful first draft of a trial brief that, took, so my trial brief in the one where I had just a short period of time to prepare, the trial brief took me about 2.5 days instead of, 5. It's pretty amazing. Really
It
like
was a
that.
long one too. I think that was what, like over 50, 60 pages.
57 pages. Yeah, it was very complicated. It was a accountant malpractice case. It's really complicated. Okay, so let's check on Legion, see how far it's gotten. Oh, it's ready. Okay.
Perfect.
Do you want to go into this now, or let me finish this slide actually? So let's think about when we're looking at what Legion's going to show us. Think of generative AI as your brilliant but somewhat unreliable first year associate, and this is what we've been talking about, right? Where there's there's mistakes that are in there that's inherent in the way that these models work, and kind of the same way that you would need to check, the work that comes from your less experienced associates. So it's, this generative AI is powerful but hazardous, so it demands this sort of heightened caution. What kind of examples have you seen of generative AI? What else can it do?
I have used it for pretty much everything. I mean, I've done motions for protective orders, I've done declarations, notices of motion. I have drafted trial briefs with you using it. I have done some terms for settlement agreements. I love client emails as well. If I have an unsophisticated client, they've never done litigation before, I can just say, hey, I got served discovery. I need you to write me a client-facing email that sort of explains what it is and what our duties and obligations are. And it's like, no problem. And then it'll spit me out a beautiful, easily legible email with bullet points and bold that I know that the client will probably read versus a wall of text. And I didn't have to, spend 30 minutes sitting there pecking away and explaining what discovery is for the 100th time, which I probably should have, saved that as a template somewhere at this point to just copy paste. But I forgot about it, and then I'd probably forget where I even saved that. So AI helps me with a lot of stuff like that, including brainstorming. I can upload a motion, and then I'll give it an opposition, and I'll say, hey, outline all the arguments that we made in our motion, and then tell me which ones they didn't address in their opposition. And then now right away, I know exactly where I'm going to start with my reply, which is, oh, they didn't even address these arguments, so they've conceded them, therefore I win. So it's a super powerful tool. Anytime you encounter any friction, I encourage that you play with it because you will be very surprised in terms of what these things can do.
Okay. All right. Well, Legion was pretty quick at going through what we gave it to consider. And what I want to show you is how different this workflow is and how much more involved the output is. So, first, what it did is gave us some information about what causes of action it thinks are applicable to this case. Now, remember, we only told it draft a complaint for breach of contract. We didn't say negligent misrepresentation, breach of express warranty, but those are actually really good inclusions. So I'm going to leave those there. But what Legion allows you to do is go through and either edit if there's something that I wanted to change about how it came up with a description of the cause of action. And down here, it also gives you information about the elements. Um, we got a question from the inner court the other night about where the elements are drawn from. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so because these models have in their data set, a large corpus of legal materials, including thousands and thousands of complaints from all over the country, it does a pretty good job of knowing what are the elements of breach of contract, especially when, especially all the educational materials talk about it and all the blogs that people have written about it. So it does a very good job of just inherently knowing what these causes of action are and what the elements are that make them up. If you are doing something more granular, it's a new statute, it probably will need a little prompting, and we enable you to be able to do that at the bottom, where there's a comment bar where you could say, hey, I want to add a cause of action under the statute, and you can copy and paste the statute in, and it'll go ahead and add it for you. So it's not a perfect system. It's a drafting aid, and you should treat it as such. But, if you're working with very common things, negligence, breach of contract, and we also have some proprietary stuff set up to handle employment cases, since there's a lot of very specific government code sections that are involved there as well. So it's a generalist platform, but if you have specific needs like class actions or employment, we have more specific tooling to sort of address that.
Great. Oh, so here's this bar down here where you said you can suggest edits. That's what this is for down here. Yeah. Okay. Great. So I got that right. All right, so let's go back to flipping through what causes of action it came up with and go ahead and edit or delete as needed. I noticed, so it came up with breach of express warranty and breach of implied warranty. I will accept those. It's a contract case. That's good. Professional negligence. I'm not sure that this one applies because I'm not sure that software developers have a professional duty. But that the breach of contract kind of covers it. So I'm going to delete this one. Fraudulent misrepresentation. I mentioned that part of the facts of the case include the software company knowing that it couldn't deliver on certain deadlines and taking Meridian's money to make it happen, not knowing they couldn't do it. But we didn't tell it to look for a breach of contract or to look for a fraud cause of action. It picked that up from the demand letter, do you think?
Probably the demand letter, but they're also just very good at issue spotting. So even if you don't have like a demand letter, you just have, here's a bunch of facts from talking with a client, writing everything down. It'll still do a very good job of issue spotting for you and figuring out what you might want to consider. It's one of the reasons why we also try to push Legion to give you at least 15 causes of action, even if they don't fit, because I want attorneys to be thinking about, maybe not, but maybe I could talk to the client and see if maybe that cause of action does fit, or I want to give them enough to maybe start thinking about their case a little bit more and some stuff that maybe they haven't thought of. So as a result, it means that you end up with, near the end, you'll get some that you're like, this doesn't, it's not even close, but at least it sort of gets you thinking about your case in a little bit, in a couple different ways.
I love that feature. And I think I mentioned to you that I did this with a set of facts in a small case. And I loaded it up and it came up with a cause of action that I didn't know existed. It found a statute that was dead on, that was newer, and it was just wonderful to be able to include that. Okay, let's keep going. Negligent performance of contract. I don't know that that's something we want to include. It's
One
not
of
really.
one of the other fun sort of things from this is sometimes it'll allege conspiracy as a cause of action, even though it's a theory of liability and not actually a cause of action. But because there's so many complaints out there where people allege, conspiracy as a cause of action, that's something that you'll see pop up now and again as
Oh,
something that.
interesting.
So
Okay. Well, it found unjust enrichment. I would have included that in a breach of contract case. Breach of good faith and fair dealing. Yep. Negligent infliction of economic loss. Yeah, nice try, but no cigar. Um, Intentional interference with contract. Good try, but I don't think that the facts support it. Violation of the Consumer Legal Remedies Act, excellent suggestion. And I would certainly, if this was a case that I didn't already know that much about, I would certainly go look to see if that one is going to be a good fit. So let's say for now that I looked into it and violation of consumer legal remedies is a good fit, and I didn't know about it ahead of time. So way cool. Violation of Business Profession Code 17200. That's something that a lot of practitioners include in their complaints in California. And then constructive fraud. I'm going to get rid of that one since we already pled intentional misrepresentation. So it looks like we've got 10 causes of action out of me telling it draft a complaint for breach of contract. It went way bigger. So let's see. And then, of course, if you have any other causes of action to suggest or any edits to suggest to each of these, you can pop that in there. And you can edit the description to tell it more about that cause of action or before moving on to the next phase, which is going to be nature of complaint and relief sought. So let's tell it, okay, we're good with these causes of action. Go ahead and draft. And so this is going to take a little bit. So let's flip back to our PowerPoint. What is the power of generative AI?
you want me to take that one?
I think so. I'll cover the rest of it.
Sure. So it really solves what she's put it here as the blank page problem. I like to refer to it as just writer's block. It's, I'm okay, I've read all this stuff. Where do I even start? I don't even know where to begin, or, maybe I can get started on something and then I'll get stuck. AI is really, really powerful for saying, yeah, no problem. And then it'll just spit it out. It's also great for, I don't really know how I want to word this, but it'll give you some suggestions and it really overcomes that sort of initial barrier where you're just staring at a blank page and you don't really know where to start and begin. And it also helps you be really consistent in terms of the language that you're using, the formatting. If I ever struggle to convey an argument, I'll just say, here's what I want to argue. can you make this sound right? And then it'll go ahead and look at everything that I've done and give me a couple permutations until now I have something that looks really well. Even though maybe sometimes I have a hard time flying a helicopter, I know that if someone crashed it into a tree, they did a bad job, or if someone's doing something like loop-de-loops, that's pretty good. So I, even though I'm maybe not the best at drafting good legal writing myself sometimes, I do know what good legal writing looks like and what I want it to look like. And so it helps me sort of overcome that issue where I'm having a hard time putting words to paper in the way that I want. And it's also just great for giving you a starting point, and it increases efficiency, reduces costs. I know that there's a perverse incentive to be inefficient in law oftentimes, but we do have price sensitive clients. And I think, like many people that use us, I really don't like having to draft discovery. It's not really entertaining. I don't like doing objections to discovery. There's a lot of friction and tedious work in law that I would rather just delegate, whether through a paralegal, an associate, or AI, whatever it is. This is a way that I can get to doing the work that I actually really want to do. I want to talk with clients more. I want to be in court arguing. I want to work on a really tough motion that requires a lot of research that I need to noodle on and think about a lot. That's sort of the areas that I want to spend more of my time rather than being stuck pecking away at a keyboard for 12 hours a day. So AI really sort of gives you the ability to reprioritize doing more high value work for your clients. And I think that's one of the biggest power aspects of AI.
Well, it's certainly been my experience. Well, the rest of the slide kind of points out the things that we've been talking about over and over throughout this presentation, the pitfalls and those ethical guardrails, and watching out for fabrication. And you saw that in the slot, the page with the causes of action that we could, pick and choose from. It fabricated some ideas, which is great. Sometimes really useful because, like I said, it helped me find a new cause of action. But also, you need to know what you're looking for and how to understand whether you can apply those elements to the facts of the case. This is why lawyers are always still going to be useful, even with AI. And then again, a reminder about your ethical guardrails. You're the author. You've got to look through it all. All right, let's check on what Legion's done. Hey, look at that. We pointed out that co-counsel didn't give you an introduction, but AI.law did. But what I've noticed here, so this is the generative AI we're talking about. It's generated this novel text, and look, there's paragraphs. And before it's given us the actual work product, you can manipulate it ahead of time and go in here and click in and edit. Do you have that same box down here?
Yeah, the comment box so you can provide comments just like you would to an associate for your intro. Like maybe for your introduction, you're like, I want to get to the meat and potatoes quicker, or maybe I want to talk about some other issue first. Or what do you really want to have in the intro? You can sort of say that there, and it'll go ahead and revise it for you pretty easily. You can just use natural language like you would talk to any associate about the work.
Neat. All right, so you can see it gave us a pretty robust introduction. And then it moved on to, you can see it shifts over here on the left-hand side, the parties, which also co-counsel gave us the parties. AI.log gave us the parties as well. So it's figured out who is who. And then it went through jurisdiction and venue. And of course, we had told it that we're in Santa Clara County, California. And then it goes into the statement of facts. So up until this point, AI law's done, given us all of these same sections, but none of the products that I've seen, of all the products that I've used, I don't see any of them that allow you to manipulate ahead of time. And if you're paying on a per document basis, if the output is something that, contains a bunch of information that you didn't need and you're paying, for instance, per page, then you're paying for something that you didn't need. So it looks like Legion solved that problem.
Yeah, my view of this is we need to build trust, and I want to deliver something that aligns with how attorneys work. And the way that that is, you tell your associate, I need a first draft of a complaint. They give it to you. You give comments, you give it back, and then they revise. And that's the same sort of workflow that we're mimicking here. And I don't like just getting a Word doc that's not properly formatted. I don't like not knowing what's going to go into it. I want the ability to sort of continue to use these tools and the power of AI in order to get to a final draft quicker. It's the last mile problem is something that not a lot of companies are solving. I think it's really crucial that attorneys have their own sort of proclivities, their own things that they really want to do, and you need to make it as easy as possible for them to do that. And the way that you do that is you have to open up the whole thing to the attorney in order to edit and revise. You just need to make it as easy as possible.
Hmm. Yeah, I like it. Okay, so let's assume I don't have any changes at the top there. Um, and oh, look what it's done. So I'm going to leave all those paragraphs because those are fine. And then look, it made us headings. Whereas if you noticed, when I didn't show it on this video, but when Arthur and I were preparing for this and we used AI.law where we had to cut and paste the facts section from our demand letter, the facts section from our demand letter had headings and AI.law erased those and gave us just a block text factual, for the factual part of it. So as opposed to what Legion can do, where it's created these headlines so we know where we're going in the story.
The difference between a first year associate and a fifth year associate, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
pretty much. All right, so you can see we've gotten through there, and that's all the information that was pulled from the demand letter itself and the agreement. You can see it picked up on things like Article 12.3 of the agreement. It was able to read that and draw it in. And then we get to the causes of action. So we already told it what causes of action we want it to pay attention to and which ones we think are not useful. And so here, now what the software has done is flesh out further with more text what those causes of action are, to be pled in the complaint itself. So you can see here now, it even has the bells and whistles about plaintiff realleges and incorporates by reference each and every allegation contained in the preceding paragraphs. That's something only a legal focused software would know. Um, and it picked up, like we said, breach of contract, and it's got all those elements in there really nicely. Negligent misrepresentation. I'm not going to look at all of these directly, but we'll scroll through and get down to the bottom to show you. There's 10 causes of action. So forgive the flipping. There's our prayer for relief. Uh, Co-counsel gave us a very rudimentary one. AI laws was a little bit better. Um, this one looks like something I could actually work with. And then same thing down here. You can suggest edits for the prayer. You can suggest edits for each of the causes of action. And then what's this little plus sign?
The little plus sign is so you can do mass feedback. And so one of the issues that I struggled with was, okay, I got this great complaint, but I want to refer to the plaintiff by their last name, or I want to refer to them by their first name. I want to make that change throughout the entire document. Beforehand, I'd have to go and say, hey, change plaintiff to this name for each section. And so the way that we solved this was, well, why don't we just give the user the ability to select whatever sections they want. It could be the entire document. It could just be all the causes of action. And then they can just say, change all reference to quantum to, some other name or to plaintiff, whatever it is. And then it'll apply that feedback to every single one. And then now you have a complete revision to your entire document without having to regenerate it, without having to manually edit everything. You get it right away.
Okay, so let's say I wanted to change in all causes of action. Um, Maybe not all causes of action. Let's say I wanted to change in everything. I'm going to change quantum dynamics. We call it quantum, but I want to say, change the name quantum to say QD for quantum dynamics.
Perfect.
Let's say we're trying to fit, we have a 15-page brief limit. and we're at 15.2 pages, and we've got to cut down a couple of words to make it in there. So, oops, I hit finalize instead. I wasn't supposed to do that. My mistake. My mistake. But anyways, you get the gist. It's gonna go in there just like find replace. And I told it, what I was looking for it to change, and it's gonna make those changes for me before I buy the document. So you can see now it's thinking, thinking, thinking. And there's the actual cost. What is the cost of Legion?
Sure. So it's $10 per page of output. We also, well, we charge you right away. At the end of every month, we send you an invoice organized by client and matter. Well, we send you multiple invoices per client and matter. And in there, we have exactly how much you spent on that matter, so you can recoup it from your client if you want. And we also put in there a time and cost estimate so that they can see how much time that they save with this. So like, oh, I would have had to spend 30 hours times 500 in order to get this complaint. Now it's only 290. It usually makes them, very happy to pay the rest of the bill. And the other sort of aspect of this is even though she generated the complaint, she's ready to sort of purchase it, check out, download it. Say she sits down with her client and they need to make a couple changes. She can go back into the workflow. She can go to the statement of facts, and
Oh,
then she
yeah.
can provide feedback and edit it just like she would. And the only difference is if you add a page, then we'll charge you the $10. We're not going to recharge you for the entire document. We'll only charge you the difference. It just doesn't go in the other direction. So I want to encourage people to, you know, play with this as much as possible. If they need to make revisions, go for it. We're not charging you until you actually go to checkout and you actually want to buy the document.
Okay. Good. So I made that mistake of hitting finalize, but it's okay because I was able to go back and continue to review. And that's actually the practice that my firm has adopted is that whoever's managing the AI for the first draft leaves it in Legion so I can come review it in Legion. And then to save our clients money, right? We're only purchasing the pages that we want to purchase. So, all right. I showed you a little bit of a preview, but what we want to do is go ahead and purchase the document. It's got my credit card in there. Go ahead and pay, and it's going to download.
I get blocked a pop up, but
Yeah, I see that. There we go. Let's see Legion's output. Oh my goodness. It's on pleading paper. It has my information in the caption because I preloaded that. It lists out all the causes of action, the demand for the jury trial. It caught does 1 through 10. And then here's the output that we already went through piece by piece. The nature and complaint.
all of the paragraph numbers are appropriately styled.
Yes. Let's say I want to add, oh, I got to enable editing. Let's say I want to add a paragraph in between 5 and 6. Look at that. The numbering works. I'm
Same with
seeing
headings as well. We the last thing I wanted was output that's just dumped in lazily into a Word doc. So we do the formatting work for you.
it's so pretty. There's those headings. And then we get into the causes of action. This is exactly the formatting that my firm uses. And like I said, I love this software because Arthur is a practicing attorney still. He understands how to use this, how it's supposed to work, what it's supposed to look like. So what I can do, without a junior associate around, is take this document that's even on pleading paper and ready to go. Which kind of scares my paralegal because she often does the draft of the shell, but I don't want to charge the client for that. So this saves more money.
And to be honest, I think that paralegals are essential. I mean,
Oh
we're never
yeah.
going to get this. Not only are they profit generators, oftentimes, they're the ones who have to go to the mat and fight with people to try to get your subpoena complied with and get those documents produced. They can help deal with clients. They're often helping with trial prep. I mean, there's a lot of other work that paralegals are really essential for that, is not going to go away because of AI. I mean, if anything, if you can take on more cases, there's going to be a lot more non-AI work that's out there that's going to need to be handled as well. So I
Yeah.
I would I would reassure her that her job is probably safe.
Well, when I show you when we show the next two applications of your product, which is about discovery, I've been having the paralegals do the first draft of the discovery, especially the objections, because I would have her do the objections anyways.
Mhm.
Okay, so we got our prayer. We got a request for jury trial. I didn't tell it about the request for jury trial. It just did that, and then it is ready to sign. But before you sign, you have to take care of your ethics, just in case. So there we go, 28 pages with the caption page. It was $290, and I didn't run a timer, but it took us. I mean, we were chit chatting a lot, but I think maybe altogether it took us 20 minutes or so if we were to really go through all those pieces. And so a point four of my time plus 290 is way cheaper than even one of my associates at $500 an hour, spending a day to create the complaint.
Yeah, well, and then how long would it take them to create a 28-page complaint with this level of fidelity? I mean, it would be like a
Right.
week-long venture.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let's look at what else it can do. So we were looking at, we can go back to the case, which is demo. And if we want to create more documents, now let's pretend, so we drafted the complaint. Let's pretend we're the defendant. All right, Arthur's just prepared this complaint, sent it over to me. I'm the defense attorney. I want to propound discovery. Let's start with contention interrogatories because this is something my paralegal would do. So go ahead and generate this document. And what we're going to do is upload. Oh, see,
Maybe.
it already has it.
Yep.
Boom. It knows that that is the complaint. So what you can do, right, is upload that and then continue to preferences, right?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so party selection. So we were Meridian when we drafted the complaint because we were the plaintiff, but now we're the defense. So Quantum Dynamics is the propounding party. I'm clicking too hard. And the responding party is Meridian. Super. Let's select the contentions.
Mhm.
Hmm. All right, hold on.
A mismatch. Interesting.
Let's go back. Let's give it a try. Maybe it was because we had uploaded. Let's try this. Pounding, contention interrogatories, generate document. I didn't have any troubles when I went through this. So in my downloaded docs is that demo complaint. Let's upload it. And then once it's uploaded, we'll hit continue to preferences. And what you're going to be able to do, which is unlike any of the other generative AI drafting softwares for law that I've seen, Legion gives the ability to click into each of the generated blocks of text and edit or delete so that you're only paying for a product that you really want. So let's see if we have anything else to talk about on the PowerPoint while that's going forward. Um, Talk to us about what other kinds of products are out there. Obviously, everyone knows about ChatGPT.
Sure. So I can talk a little bit about. So I actually use ChatGPT's deep research function now and again. It's really good for, say I need to do a motion for leave to amend, and I really feel like digging through my templates, trying to find what I've done before. I just need a quick refresher on it. I'll say, hey, go put me together like a quick legal memo on what the standards are for doing that, and it'll go think and dig through the internet and find cases and give me something pretty decent in 5 to 10 minutes that I can then use to flesh out the legal standard for my motion pretty quickly. So I like to use it for that sort of aspect. I'm not really a big fan of how it drafts. I don't really like its legal writing, so I don't really use it for stuff like that beyond those sort of functions. Co-counsel, again, that's from Westlaw. We sort of already saw the quality of their output. Even if you use it for research, it'll still, it won't give you fake cases, but it'll say things without a citation, and then, it'll also tend to misunderstand the reasoning that the court had, the holding. I mean, it's not super great at understanding the actual facts of the case, but it'll do an okay job for general like legal research searching to try to find you cases that you should start looking at. But I would not really use it as a source of truth for legal research, nor also for drafting, as we saw, it's not the best.
We have a
Harvey,
slide on that in a minute about the risks of using generative AI for legal research. That being said, I gave it a try last night. I got a referral for a case for a client that needed some quick work that had to do with a new statute that was just passed in California, and they're having trouble finding an attorney that knows about the statute because nobody knows about the statute. So I went to co-counsel because I would trust the citations from co-counsel more than I would trust the citations from other places. Like Arthur just said, it's not going to come up with a fake case, but it might give you some text without a citation, which is frustrating. So I used co-counsel. I asked it about this new law that came out, and it gave me a little memo that was pretty useful, and it was enough that in 5 minutes I could be conversant with the client about what the various elements of this law are. And actually, it was an assembly bill and a Senate bill that came together. I don't even think it has a statute number assigned to it yet. We're still referring to it as AB such and such and Senate bill yada yada. And so it was able to produce me a memo about how these two pieces work together. And now I'm ready for that client to call me today, and I will explain to them, brand new law. I've researched it, I've looked it up. There's actually no cases about it. So I asked co-counsel to tell me if there was any cases. Nothing there. So nobody knows more about this law than me
and that
at this
took
point.
you, not very much time at all to throw that all together and be on top of it and pretty well read on the topic. It's great.
Right. Right. Which then helps intakes, right? I mean, we're spending on, you want to be able to, when you first talk to the client and try and get them to sign up with your firm, you want to show them that you have the expertise that they're looking for. And so, some of these tools can be really useful with helping you just get the lay of the land real quick, which I think co-counsel is good for, again, because it's built on Westlaw, which has real cases. I would be more leery of using a Harvey Claude AI.law to explain to you about what a law is. So I think co-counsel is useful for that, but that's pretty much where it ends.
So I have a lot of opinions on Harvey, but in general, I think they're very, very expensive for what they are. I have heard from a lot of folks that it's a pretty unfocused product. They're trying to do too many things. Their founder was a first year, new baby attorney, and so sort of as a consequence of that, I think that they're still trying to figure out their footing. I think that their distribution play was masterclass. I mean, they somehow managed to get all of Big Law on board for AI law. They were the first ones doing it, but now they need to sort of deliver on that. And so far I haven't heard a lot of glowing things about it. Maybe beyond Bolt for due diligence, and that's about it. Claude itself is a generalist platform. I think it's one of the best writers. I like to use Claude Opus for a lot of my work that I can't do on our Legion platform. It's a very powerful tool for handling a lot of stuff. You can create projects, throw a bunch of documents into it, and then sort of work with it to draft motions, all sorts of fun stuff. I really like Claude a lot. They're sort of the more privacy focused version of ChatGPT. They're founded by folks that split off of ChatGPT or OpenAI originally. A.law, I'm not super well read on, so Katie could speak to that. And then Legion, you're already sort of seeing.
I'll say about Claude, the other night when I was doing this presentation before the end, I mentioned that the second speaker on the panel was a professor from University of San Francisco School of Law, and it's Claude that they use. And so she was able to, she didn't live demo it, but she showed us some slides of what Claude looks like and how you can prompt it. First to ask, the first question she asked Claude was, how, what goes into a motion in limine? And then the next question was, you know, draft a motion in limine regarding this topic. And it was able to, give some good information there, but again, not totally legal focused. But it's enough that her students are able to work with the AI generated text and come up with pleadings, motions, things that the professor then grades, knowing that a lot of it did come from AI and then they're manipulating on top of that. Um, AI.law, that's the screen kind of over here to the left. It does a lot of things. We saw draft a lawsuit, it can draft an answer, it can request a respond to discovery, it can summarize. I have a whole other video about summarization AI. And it'll do things like summarize a deposition, it can build you a timeline, and then like make a chronology for medical records. The the non-litigators, I think, need to be more worried about AI coming for their jobs and draft a contract. But all of this is, I'd say, mediocre quality. I spoke to several of the judges in the inn of court that I'm a part of, and they all just said, "Yeah, it's all right." But they hadn't seen Legion, so we kind of blew their minds. So let's go back to Legion and see how far we got. All right, so contention interrogatories. We're going to continue to preferences. And what am I doing?
We're pretending to be quantum, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Quantum, meridian, select contentions.
Can you do me a favor and refresh the page? And we'll see if that fixes it.
It
There we go.
does. It does. Okay, so here's the complaint. And now the sentences in the complaint are highlighted. And what you get to do to create contention interrogatories is just the same thing that you would do if you were telling your paralegal or your associate to do it. Ask interrogatories about this sentence. And let's say I want this sentence. And I care about this sentence. And generally, what you're going to do is select, you're not going to select jurisdiction and venue, but you would select a lot of the facts pled. And once you've selected everything that you are interested in having it create a contention interrogatory for, and those show up over here, right, which ones you want. And Arthur, explain to me these buttons here.
Sure. So the little pencil is pretty easy. You can just edit what you have. To make a direct edit, the trash can is if you change your mind, you want to get rid of it. Then there's the handy dandy little split with AI, which is, say you have a sentence that's compounded, has like three separate contentions. Arthur robbed a bank, stole a car, and then shot a guy. Maybe I want to split those into three separate contentions. That's when you
All
would
right,
sort
let's try this one. Here's a big sentence. It's split with AI.
There we go. And then it'll sort of turn it into a bunch of separate contentions that you'll be able to use.
Oh, great. So look, it fragmented it into 8. And if I didn't like the way it split it, can I hit resplit?
Yeah, I think you could refresh it and try again.
Let's see. Just assuming we didn't like the way it did that. All right. So let's say I'm happy with that now. I'll apply those 8 fragments and I'll continue on my merry way of selecting contentions. And when I have selected all the contentions that I am interested in, I'm going to go up to finalize, right? Oh, we didn't do this button. Merge with previous. What does that do?
Yeah, so that's like if you split something and you change your mind, or if maybe there's two sentences that you want to put together. Maybe for whatever reason our system didn't do a good job of grabbing a whole contention. You need to sort of combine them. That's how you would do that. Then it'll
Okay.
just merge the previous two.
Okay. And what does export selections do?
That one was to solve the problem of, we have a paralegal, they go through, they click all the contentions, and then they just hand the output to their attorney. And the attorney's like, great, I have no idea which contentions that you picked for these contention logs. So we put a button in there where you can export that, and you'll get a PDF that has highlighted all of the contentions that were used to draft the interrogatories.
So sort of the, a little bit opposite procedure from I highlight them on paper and hand them to my paralegal. Instead, she goes in and clicks on all the sentences in here that contain a factual contention and then gives me a report about what she's clicked on so I can then review that along with the interrogatories that it comes up with. Yes.
Exactly. It's a lot easier to sort of review this if you just have a highlighted complaint rather than having to
Yeah.
look through 300 contention logs.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say we selected all the facts. Let's hit finalized. And it'll take a minute. So we can go back to our PowerPoint and finish up about AI legal research. If generative AI drafting software is your brilliant but unreliable first year associate. Then AI assisted legal research is your confident informant in a very hazardous area where it's generating the most headlines, controversy, and professional sanctions because this is where you're getting those hallucinations. So there's two ways to use AI assisted search, right? You can have it enhance your traditional trusted databases like a Westlaw, right? Or there's the pure generative AI performing the research for you, which is dangerous. Um, Again, with co-counsel, right, it'll give you a bunch of cases that are real, but you also have to make sure that they apply.
Yeah, the only edit on this slide would be safer instead of safe.
Yeah,
It's better to
safer.
be using the tool, but there's still
Right.
issues with interpreting or understanding the actual cases that you need to be aware of.
Absolutely. And that's where that career threatening danger comes in. Do not be the person that the appellate court confirms $10,000 in sanctions against. Just don't do it.
No one wants to be that person.
No. All right, let's see where we are. All right. Now it has given us something that you should recognize. This looks like the first page of a set of discovery with all the definitions and explanations. And then we get right into the special interrogatories that are drafted. Now, remember, we had selected, I selected this sentence, which I probably shouldn't have because it doesn't really contain a factual statement. But nevertheless, what it did was went ahead and said, state all facts, identify all persons, identify all documents. And it does that just like your paralegal would do for every sentence you highlighted. On June 15th, Meridian entered a software development agreement. Okay, well, I'm the defendant. Well, what facts do you have about that? Identify the people that know something about it and identify all the documents. And then, of course, you're going to go and do a request for reduction of documents that says, give me all the documents that were identified in your responses to the special interrogatories. So this makes it just very easy to draft contention interrogatories. So easy that Judge Farrell, who spoke the other night at the end of court, said, "This scares me that it's so easy, and it's going to be so easy to create motions to compel that it's going to clog up the court system." All right, you got down here this little bar again where you can make either changes to all the contention interrogatories at once or just specific ones.
Yeah,
Uh,
we've had some customers that prefer like a very first contention that says, do you contend that? And then, maybe they have a slightly different formula, like they like to ask for documents in their second ROG rather than every third ROG, that sort of thing. So they can provide mass feedback and say, this is the format that I want you to do these contentions for. I've had other customers that they don't really like putting stuff in quotations. They would rather just have a natural language, like here's the contention that you ran the red light or something, rather than in quotes such and such ran the red light. And you can also say, instead of quoting the contention directly, just get rid of the quotations, turn it into natural language. So you have a lot of control over what the final output looks like, and that's perfect for doing mass selections. And the last thing that I would mention before anyone messages me and says, hey, those aren't code compliant, they have separate definitions, they need to be in there. We provide both options. You can have your definitions separate, or you can have them nested where the first time that they appear, we will define them in that special interrogatory. So we appeal to both schools of thought on that.
Little stylistic options. That's great. Let's hit finalize. Is that in preferences, what you just mentioned? Current
Yeah,
definition style?
right there.
Ah, nested, separate. Beautiful. All right, that's good. Okay, so back to special rogs, and then we don't need to redo the contentions.
No, on the left, just scroll down and click on purchase
Okay.
in
Yeah,
that bar.
okay,
Yeah.
purchase.
Taking there.
And it'll give us the same screen that we saw last time. So again, $10 a page. And contention logs can be huge, right? If we have a big old 30-page complaint with 10 pages of facts, you're saving your client so much money with this product and the contention interrogatories.
And
Uh,
the other sort of fun part of this is we'll we'll identify how many contentions you have. And if it's over 35, then we'll go ahead and give you a counsel declaration automatically already filled out for you.
Great. That's great. I saw on there you can separately make it to a council declaration, but you're saying it will notice if the number is over 35. That's
That's
great.
right.
Okay. So let's purchase this document. Here's my credit card, $130. Great. And that took us 5 minutes without all the banter.
Hmm.
And let's open that up. And again, it's got the caption, it's got the case, it has all those definitions. I don't mind having my definitions here. If you want them nested, we showed you how to do that. That's fine. And then it goes through those special interrogatories just like it showed on the screen. It's just that it's in a spot where you can um, you can hand this over to the partner and have them take a look at it alongside that report that Arthur mentioned, where it highlights the PDF. And that's how to make contention interrogatories. Do you want to play around with one more?
You can also, if you want to show them the council declaration, you can.
Oh, yeah, let's do that. How do I get back to that
It was
screen? Right.
the left one on, yeah, right there.
Ah,
And then you
okay.
should go like that. Yeah. Click
Okay.
purchase.
Oh, let me preview it first because I want to
So
see
I
what
will say
that
we
is.
haven't figured out a good way to do the preview. Sometimes it doesn't
Okay,
work,
good.
and sometimes formatting is weird.
Forget about it. We all know what a council declaration looks like, but let's see what yours looks like. It's so fast. There it is. I've previously propounded a total of 0 special interrogatories. Of course, you're going to need to change that if you're not able to tell how many you've done before. It tells you how many, 45, which is over what California allows for 35. So we need this declaration. And there it is. And that's something that I've forgotten to do. So it's really nice that Legion just does it for you. Okay. And then finally, let's create a new document. Let's try and respond to discovery.
Oh,
Nobody
we
likes.
can respond to the special interrogatories we just did.
Oh, okay. Let's do that. Let's generate that document. And we are going to,
Just pick your complaint, and
is
this
that
is
it?
how we analyze relevance objections. I don't think it will matter since they're both pretty much the same.
Okay. So here's the contention interrogatories.
Uh,
Did I do
so
that right?
you need to put the pleading in there.
Oh, okay. Let's see. So,
I think
hold on, user error.
it's okay. It shouldn't have let you, or maybe it'll error. Be interesting to see how it handles this. It should give you a warning. But
All
while it's
right.
sort of doodling on that, you can pick on the right the special interrogatories.
Yes. So remember, we were the plaintiff Meridian, we drafted the complaint. Then we were the defendant Quantum, we drafted the contention interrogatories. Now we're going to respond. And so it's defendant Quantum interrogatories responding. And it looks like it's just going to think a little bit more.
Yeah.
Is there a cross pleading? Not in this case, but that's cool that you can upload that. Um, was there a
That
council
was at
declaration?
your request. There we go. So we can
Ah,
remove and then put in one of the complaints. Then you can just select one. It's already
oh, it's already there. That's right. Okay.
choose one.
Well, I'm already here, so I will. Let's go back to the complaint that we. Oh no, I looked in the
Now
contention
you'll just have
first.
to wait for it to process if you do it that way. Nope, nope, that's the
Oh, I keep doing
you
it.
did it again.
Guys, it's late in the presentation. That's frustrating. Okay, well, we'll get there in a second. What does the cross pleading do?
So that one is that was actually a request to your firm because there was a complaint and a cross complaint that was involved, and so there is some discovery. And in order to analyze relevance objections, you need to have an understanding of what the four corners of the pleadings are. So we didn't have the ability to upload a cross complaint as well to check for that. So we added support so that it will not only look at the complaint, it will also look at now. Stop it. No,
Wait, where do I
cancel,
go?
cancel. Hit cancel.
Cancel.
Click one of the check boxes. Those are the two complaints that are already in there. You can just pick one
Thank
of
you.
those. Awesome. We don't have a cross pleading, so we don't need to do anything there. You're good to
Okay. And there's a special interrogatories document, no cross pleading. Yes, there was a council declaration. Continue preferences.
yep, good to go.
All right. So propounding parties. The propounding party was Meridian.
I
We're Quantum. We're responding. Do you want to include a preliminary statement and objections?
think it's
Yes.
I think it's the opposite, right? Because the contention rugs were by the software company since we were defensive. So the propounding party is Quantum, and then the responding party is Meridian
Hmm.
for the contention rugs, right? Uh,
Meridian was the propounding party for the content. No, you're right. You're right. I'm getting this wrong. Thinking too hard over here. See how much thinking AI still requires? Okay, so include a preliminary statement injections? Yes. This is my favorite button right here. What objection style do you want? Do you want to go conservative or all the way to scorch?
when you really, really hate opposing counsel.
Yes, so let's do scorched earth, and you can add custom instructions too. Go ahead and put those in there. I'm not going to do it right now. But that's, let's say, scorched earth. Great. And it gives you some information about, when to choose these things if you need some guidance. But I, as an experienced practitioner, know that I really hate opposing counsel, and they are not going to do anything about me including a million scorched earth objections. So I'm going to do it. How specific do we want it to be? You can make the objection specific, boilerplate, or both, which I think is good, right? A combo. And then what other features are these here?
So there's the response and objection settings. So if you have different language that you want to have for your objections, this is where you could edit it. If as a practice you like to always assert certain objections, you can click the little check boxes and it will always assert them regardless. So some people like to do to the extent attorney-client privilege, to the extent work product, and then it'll make sure to always assert those to all of your responses. And then you can add your own custom objections here too at the bottom. And we even give you the ability to add your own substantive responses as well. So you can completely customize all of your objections however you want.
Oh, excellent. Okay. And then you can choose in your substantive response whether there's going to be the line. If you're not responding with just objections, you want that line in there that says, subject to the objections notwithstanding, we're going to give you the information.
That's
There's
right.
that right there. Okay. So I'm going to close out of this. Do we want to include the requests themselves? Yes, because it's such a cut and paste job. Yes, I do. And then do you want the prefix to say objection? I don't need that, but you can if you want to. All right, let's hit generate objections. And like I said, my office has been doing the practice where we make the document in Legion, and then it's at this stage that my paralegal is going to turn it over to me because I'm not going to delegate the legal thinking to a paralegal to choose which objections are relevant. A lawyer needs to look at that. So she'll prepare it for me to this point. She knows what I like, whether I want to go scorched earth. She knows that I want the request copied in there. And, this is the amount of work that she would be doing in, a day plus, whereas now I've freed her up to do some other substantive work. So we can not only represent more clients, we can do it more efficiently, which I absolutely love. And when I talk to clients about our use of generative AI, They are so excited about it. I think I have later in this slide deck, and let's actually go check that right now. A slide about, oh, look at that. It's right there. We talked about the risks of generative AI. Let's talk about two things: having an AI policy and also having a representation agreement clause. So, an AI policy within your firm is going to set guidelines that govern your ethical, responsible, and safe use of AI. And the content's going to vary depending on your law firm size, your client focus, and how you're using AI. But what you want to consider when you're crafting a policy, you want to look at defining the scope of the policy and who's affected. You want to establish and reference ethical principles and the values of your firm. You want to create and reference a data governance strategy, address potential bias and discrimination, because there can be bias in the output if there's bias in your input, right? If the prompt that you give it is really biased, it's going to pick up on that and reflect that back to you. And then also your policy should include providing regular training and guidance on how to review this policy to make sure it's up to date. Because as you probably gathered from what Arthur had to say, this stuff is changing really rapidly. I included a hyperlink to an AI policy for Fisher Phillips that I really liked. You can take a look at that. And I've now given you the representation agreement clause that my firm uses uh, in there. So they're signing right away, knowing that we are going to use this generative AI. And we say, you acknowledge that we're going to use this licensed third party technology to draft or organize our work product, conduct legal research, manage documents, and do some of our other professional functions. But we promise to do it consistent with applicable laws, regulations, and ethical duties, and consistent with the client's privacy and confidentiality interests. So the client agrees to let us use it. I agree to reasonably supervise the use of such technologies. Again, back to the ethics. I'm going to supervise that, and I'm going to make sure that I don't use any tools that transmit your personally identifiable or case specific information to an unsecured third party platform. So that is what you need to be telling your clients at the outset about what you're doing with AI. I highly recommend making sure that that's all clear. Oh, it's still thinking.
I'm gonna refresh the page and we'll see if
Sure.
it actually loaded.
Looks like that's going to do it. Not yet. That's okay. We'll go back here. While it's continuing to think, why don't you talk to us about data security and client confidentiality?
Sure. So, like I sort of mentioned before, if you're not paying for it, then you're the product. So, using a public tool that is not an enterprise version, where it's not a closed system, you are the product. You really don't want to be uploading anything that's sensitive, since it'll be used in order to train the model. It'll be looked at. There's some pretty severe breaches that'll go on there if that's what you're doing. So when you're using these tools, you can use ChatGPTs for business. There's Claude for business. There's enterprise versions of even these larger general purpose models that you can use. And then that's will usually give you a lot better certainty on complying with your ethical obligations, so that you're not running afoul of anything there. It is really easy to make a simple firm policy for sort of outlining what can and can't be entered into AI. That'll at least cover you for folks that, even if you're saying you shouldn't be using it, but if you are, these are the things that you need to be very, very aware of. You have sort of almost a duty at this point to educate your staff on proper use of AI to avoid these issues from happening. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who's responsible and supervising this sort of stuff. So some key questions that you can ask your AI vendor about their data security and privacy policies are, what are you doing with my data? Who has access to it? How long are you storing it for? Are you using it to train AI models with it? What's your sort of security looking like? Do you have SOC 2? Do you have encryption on my information when I'm interacting with a platform or when it's stored on your platform? All that good stuff. So you want to sort of be asking those questions, and that'll give you at least a good sense of whether or not you want to go with this vendor, if they're reputable or not.
What is SOC 2 type 2? You said we should be looking for that. That's some sort of,
Yeah, I don't. I would not say it's essential. It's very much like it's very expensive for a company to get. And it's pretty much like an independent security certification where there's a bunch of different things you need to comply with in terms of data access, how you sort of have your systems and processes set up. It can take a while to set up everything that way. And then it also takes a bit to have someone audit you to actually give you your SOC 2 certification. In general, for at least our platform, we have data encryption, we have zero data retention agreements. We will still need to spend a lot of time to get up to a SOC 2 compliance standard. But in general, since we do mainly litigation and everything ends up publicly filed anyway, the sort of need for SOC 2 is a little bit less, but it's still something good to look for, especially if it's a larger, more established vendor. This is something that is pretty standard across a lot of companies. I'm sure Westlaw and Lexus are probably SOC 2 compliant.
okay. Well, it's good to be educated enough to even know what kind of questions to ask. So you want to ask about the technology, the process, the people, their certification, and what happens to that content for data privacy issues. And let's get out of here and see if Legion is done. Uh-oh, I'm having the same problem I had the other night where I'm not able to get out of
Yeah.
my PowerPoint. Oh no. Let's see. Sorry, everyone. End task. We're done with the PowerPoint anyways. And we'll hit F5. Still thinking. Any suggestions for me?
Yeah, let me take a look.
So
We
this
could
is the final piece that we're going to show you while he's looking for that. This to remind you, this is the responding to discovery with the scorched earth
on
objections.
the left, why don't you expand that little menu there?
This?
Yeah, and then let's go to back to preferences and let's just try to regenerate and see if we can kick off the workflow here.
Okay, so everything's the same. Regenerate.
Let's see if I can
Murphy's Law, right? Something's gonna go
do law,
wrong.
man. Do it 100 times, and the minute it's live, things break. It was my turn.
Hmm. That's fine. Well, while it's thinking, I can show you the actual output. I think I have a file for it. Sample discovery. This is what we created before. Um, Special inventories. There we go. There's that pretty caption page. It's got the definitions. And again, if you want the definitions to be within, you can nest them there. And then these are true special interrogatories. This went ahead and went through and pulled more than just the contention logs. Um, so I was really pleased with this function here, where it can actually do the special logs. In fact, I had my associate do some the other day where she gave it to me, and I was like, "Did you use Legion for this? I asked you to use Legion for this." And she's like, "Yeah, I did. This is what it came up with." Like, oh, cool. I thought it was her own original thinking at $575 an hour, and I didn't want that for the client who's already very destitute. So there you go. And in this case, we only did 35. So there isn't a council declaration, but it would give us a council declaration if it was over 35. So there you have it, folks. That's how to use generative AI in your law firms. So I've transformed my own practice. There are lots of softwares out there that you can use. I encourage you to play with them. I've had my own journey from starting with CoCounsel all the way to finding Legion. I'm lucky that I'm in San Francisco and I get to, meet all these bright entrepreneurs that are trying out their software in this area and looking for people to help. And I really love working with you, Arthur, and I'm so thankful for this software. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for having me, Katie. It's been a wild ride. I was a litigator, not an entrepreneur, so there's been a lot of learning and a lot of sort of fun stuff. I think my favorite part of doing this is When you're in litigation, your clients are unhappy about the bills. It can be very contentious. And now I get to sort of sit down with attorneys like you, and they get to see a really cool product that we're building, and they get excited, and they like to use it and play with it, and then tell other people about it. And that's such a different energy than I'm used to practicing and fighting every day in litigation. So a big thank you for including me in this and for showing everyone what we've been up to. You've been great. We need early adopters and advocates like you because it's a hard job selling to attorneys. Weirdly enough, we're all very skeptical and we smell bullshit from a mile away. So, um,
It's that way. It took my office manager and my very tech savvy boyfriend. It took them probably 6, 8 months pounding on me saying, hey, you should really try this AI stuff. It wasn't until my associate left in May that it became, like I said, a necessity. And I'm so glad it did. It's saving my clients a bunch of money. I'm happier. I actually think it's really fun when it's time to go play with this stuff. I'm like, yay. I mean, how often are litigators saying the job is fun?
right.
It really can be. I mean, what's fun is reaching resolution. And products like this help you reach resolution with your client way faster, way cheaper, and I can solve more problems with Legion's help. So with that, we'll sign off. If you have questions, certainly contact Arthur if you need to. Contact me if you'd like some more guidance on how to work with your practice. I'd be happy to do a little consult with you there. And we look forward to having you transform your practice just like I transform mine. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.